Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today, I want to break down the facts surrounding the USAID pause that is making headlines right now. So no fluff, let's just get straight into it. USAID stands for the United States Agency of International Development. It's an independent agency in the US government responsible for essentially civilian foreign aid and development. Being such a large continent, Africa is predominantly where there's quite a lot of the money from this agency poured into. So the budget is around $50 billion from what I can see in my research, and it's currently operating in over 100 countries, not specifically in Africa, but just in general. There tends to be a lot of African countries on the list, and it tends to focus on issues surrounding healthcare, education, and economic development. Economic development to me is fluffy, and I think it's just a window. It's left open for things to then be made to qualify within that bracket, which creates opportunities for, if you know what I mean. What I find interesting is almost every developed or advanced country has its own version of aid, of an aid agency. You know, that tells me, I can't help but wonder, is it really about charity, or is this some sort of business model in itself actually? And when I say business, I don't necessarily mean direct financial profit. It could be influence, it could be creating power imbalances, it could be establishing a strategy for the future, a strategic dependence, or securing future trade advantage. You know, I mean, if we want to look at what goes on in Africa, and we all have the question in our minds, you know, even though we feel somewhat powerless to tackle it head on, but the fact is, Africa is such a rich continent. How is it that we're still where we are and we still have the problems that we have? And I honestly think it's enveloped in what I've just said: power vacuums, power imbalances, established strategic dependencies, and people sow seeds to buy future favors in Africa, on the continent, at the expense of our resources and our people. That's my thoughts all. Anyway, when I was younger, I always wondered, and I know it was not just me, why is it that the American president, whoever it might be at the time, their opinion was always sought after whenever something major happened, whenever it's like a major global event or disaster, or a country decides to do bad on their people, they will look to the American president like, what are your thoughts on the events in Timbuktu, you know? And it's like, it makes sense now. It makes so much sense. The president in time in America would rush to make a statement, or mid to walking to their office, the reporter rushes to ask them this question about whatever event it might be, and they have to comment. You know, the reason they have to comment is because they're pouring in money. If you're the biggest donor, your word is going to be sought for. Your word is going to be important. What you decide to do as a consequence for whatever the event is holds so much weight, because you're the money. Your word is important. Your money carries weight. Let's get into numbers. Let's get into specific numbers, because I was curious. I think this is the thing, and I think in Africa, once we start knowing numbers, once we start knowing who is who and where is the numbers, follow the money, yeah? Once you start knowing where the money is going and coming from, you start to have very valid questions, and you start to put people under pressure as well. So let's follow the money and let's look at, okay, so for example, in 2022, USAID allocated approximately $622 million primarily for HIV and AIDS treatments and prevention under the president's emergency plan. I think what's important in my research, what I realized is they will state how much and the year, and under what scheme was that money granted. I think that's very important, because you need to know, why is the money being given? Who is applying for it? Okay, Mozambique received 564 million, mainly for malaria prevention and healthcare improvement under the president's malaria initiative. Tanzania got $560 million, it's all in the fives or million dollars for agricultural support or development and food security. This was under the Feed the Future initiative. Uganda got 549 million for healthcare and significant investment in maternal and child care. Kenya got 512 million to focus on strengthening democratic governance and economic development. $500 million. These are massive sums, but what really stands out is how much bigger they get, how much bigger they become when you convert them to local currencies. Yeah. When you look at these funds, most will be spent on local operations, salaries, and infrastructure, you know, like setting things up. But the day-to-day, the maintenance is going to be at local rates, local cost levels. You know, what you pay people, what you pay for things to be delivered, to move, to run. It's mostly headcount. Is it headcount? Whatever the language is, right? Basically salaries, yeah? Labor cost is usually the biggest cost of running a business, followed by, or if not on top, depending on what it is, the initial setup and the premises, your rent or to build. And then the other big cost will be, okay, maybe when you're buying equipment, you buy it from abroad, you buy it from outside the country because it's lacking to begin with. So you bring it from outside in, and most likely you're going to pay world level costs. You're going to pay in US dollar, and that's going to be expensive. But $500 million, yeah, by the time it arrives in a country, once the major things are done, you've got a premises, you've got the equipment, everything else is operating at a local cost level. A lot of people are celebrating about this USAID pausing. They're saying it will force our leaders, our governments, to stop relying on handouts and actually take this as the opportunity to sit up and start doing something by yourself. I kind of feel both sides. I get it. And like I said, the money that we've been getting is a lot of money. And also, can we just stop here and pause and think about the state in which America is in, as a country, as a whole. The feedback lately when people visit New York, when people visit all these major states within the US, the deterioration, the rate at which things are going downhill are scary. They themselves need aid. How then is that country pouring billions, millions into other countries that are not developing? You're not seeing any improvement, but you continue to give. Where is it? Like, at some point we have to wonder, like, we're making a loss somewhere. I don't know where, but it's not making sense. This is why I'm like, this has to be a business, surely. It has to be. And this is why most people are celebrating. It's a pause whilst they review, but it's definitely put food for thought on the table. But it does worry me. I mean, the pause means critical projects within healthcare, agriculture, infrastructure, whatever it might be, are disrupted. If African governments don't have a contingency plan, let's be real, the people who will suffer are the people, not the people who already have the money, but the people that we're supposed to be, or that we're actually benefiting from this aid. And we're not talking about aid, we're not talking about, you know, when they're rushing in with bags of rice in a crisis. This is money that's been supposedly injected in frequently to support and maintain. So now we're saying our government is supposed to magic up that money from somewhere. Is that going to happen? I don't know, you know. In my eyes, I see this as potentially, if they do cut it, or if they put terms that are not favorable, and I feel like they'll just run and go and look for someone else. Okay, the likes of China, Russia, you know, to just replace America. And I feel like much of African countries are used in disputes, you know, who is going to take over when the US leaves or when the UK leaves, you know, but somebody else steps in, you know. What are they getting in return? There is something they're getting in return. And this is what, as a people, we need to start thinking about and going into the details about. One thing that does give me hope a little bit is how much easier it is to gain information, to see what's happening. You almost get things in real time sometimes. We need to start paying attention, and we need to start asking questions. And I think this sort of thing is good. If we know how much aid is being allocated, if we know what countries are being given, what regions, what specific sectors, is it water, is it education, we can hold people accountable. We can ask questions like, okay, so in 2022, that $522 billion, what happened? Where did it go? And what fruits are we seeing from that money, from that aid? And how frequently is this money given? How are the results measured? I'm sure there's how they do all these things, but the reason why most people are celebrating the pause without thinking about the actual genuine knock-on effects is because they're like, this money, like 500, do we look like 500 million passed our way as a country? That is why people are feeling the way they're feeling, and I get it, I understand. So without transparency, without forcing our leaders to be accountable, and it's going to have to be force we use, because asking nicely or expecting that they'd be transparent is obviously, it hasn't worked. Funds disappear, suddenly foreign aid never actually reaches people. My hope is this USAID pause doesn't create an immediate crisis. It just pushes our leaders to want to develop a proper transition plan, for one, and then also to actually make a plan that is not reliant on aid. You can get help or you can get support, but it shouldn't be to the extent that if removed, then you're dead, you're in for it. And also it should just reach where it's actually supposed to reach and do what it's supposed to do. What comes to mind for me is the Zimbabwe's redistribution program as an example. A lot of people now look back and be like, oh, Mugabe was ahead of his time, in what he was trying to do. The story is a lot more complex than what he tried to do, but if we want to look at the surface level, what flopped big time was the lack of transition. I mean, okay, the plan I'm sure was there, but the monitoring of the transition plan to actually make sure it's executed the way it's supposed to be is where many African countries struggle. The transition plan, managing it, overseeing it, putting it in place, managing it, and overseeing its successful implementation is usually the challenge. I think I'm going to stop here and say to you guys, what are your thoughts? Is this pause the push that Africa needs to be self-sustainable, or is it a risky gamble, or creating a power vacuum? Like I said, let me know through the comments below. Keep it nice, keep it kind, factual, share your opinion, share how you feel, but be nice, please. Thank you so much, and until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you in my next video.